The smoke cleared slowly from the battlefield, revealing bodies scattered across the rocky ridge like broken dolls. Velsha stood in the center of it all, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. Her armor was cracked in 3 places, blue blood seeping through the gaps. In her hands she held 2 pieces of what used to be her spear. The weapon had been in her family for 6 generations. Now it was just scrap metal. She looked up at the human who had fallen from the sky. He stood 20 meters away, checking his weapon with casual efficiency. His armor was black and scarred, marked with burns from atmospheric entry. Steam rose from the cooling panels on his back. He had crashed into the middle of the enemy formation like a meteor, and the shockwave alone had killed half of them. The rest he had shot with cold precision. Velsha had seen many warriors in her life. She had fought alongside the best soldiers her people could produce, but she had never seen anything like this human. He had fallen from orbit without a drop pod, without any vehicle at all. Just him and his armor, screaming through the atmosphere like a chunk of burning metal. It should have killed him. Instead, he had landed fighting. The human looked up and noticed her watching him. He walked over, his boots crunching on the loose rocks. Up close, Velsha could see his face through the transparent section of his helmet. He was young, maybe 30 cycles by human standards. His eyes were green and alert, constantly scanning for threats even though the enemy was gone. "You okay?" he asked. His voice came through translated clearly, though there was a strange accent to it. Velsha looked down at her broken spear, then back at him. "I live. That is enough for now." The human nodded like he understood exactly what she meant. "Name's Jake Morrison, Staff Sergeant 47th Orbital Drop Infantry." He paused, looking around at the dead Zarvan soldiers. "Hell of a fight you put up here." "Velsha of the 3rd Spear," she replied, using the formal greeting of her people. "My squad held this position for 2 days. Then the enemy brought heavy weapons. I was the only one left when you arrived." Jake knelt down and examined one of the Zarvan bodies. The enemy soldier was heavily modified with cybernetics, its organic parts barely visible under the metal plating. "Collective assault troops," he said quietly. "They don't feel pain, don't feel fear. Makes them hard to stop." "Yes," Velsha agreed. "They kept coming no matter how many we killed. When my spear broke, I thought it was over." Jake stood up and looked at her carefully. "But you didn't run?" "No," Velsha said simply. "This ridge overlooks the pass to our capital. If I ran, they would take it. If they took it, my people would die. So I stood." Something changed in Jake's expression. It was subtle, but Velsha saw it. Respect, maybe, understanding. "Yeah," he said. "I get that." Velsha gestured at his armor, still warm from re-entry. "How did you survive the fall?" "I saw no pod, no vehicle. Just you," Jake grinned. It was a strange expression, showing teeth like a predator but somehow friendly. Human drop armor uses controlled ablation. The outer layers burn away during entry, shedding heat. Then at the last second, grav brakes kick in and slow you down. It's not comfortable, but it works. "Your people do this regularly?" Velsha asked, trying to imagine choosing to fall from space as a combat tactic. "Every mission," Jake confirmed. "Fast insertion, hard to shoot down, and it scares the hell out of the enemy when you land on their heads." He paused. "Speaking of which, where are your lines?" "I can escort you back." Velsha shook her head firmly. "My squad died holding this position. I will not abandon it now." Jake was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Then I guess we're both staying." He unslung his pack and started pulling out equipment.
"How long until reinforcements arrive?"
"Command says 18 hours at minimum," Velsha admitted. "The enemy has blocked all the approach routes. Relief forces have to fight through them first." 18 hours, Jake repeated, setting down what looked like a portable barrier generator. "Okay, we can work with that." He glanced at her. "You injured anywhere besides the obvious spots?" Velsha checked herself carefully. Her right arm ached where she had blocked a plasma blade, and her left leg had taken shrapnel from an explosion, but nothing vital was damaged. "I can fight." "Good," Jake said. "Because they're coming back. Always do." He pointed at the valley below where Velsha could see movement in the tree line. Enemy troops regrouping for another assault. "They want this ridge bad, which means we're going to make them pay for every meter." Velsha watched him work, setting up defensive positions with quick efficiency. He placed small charges at choke points, arranged fallen debris to create cover, and marked firing lanes with tiny laser designators. Every movement was purposeful, practiced. This was not his first impossible defense. You do this often? She asked. Hold positions that should not be held? Jake looked up from his work and smiled that strange human smile again. It's kind of our thing. Humans have been fighting losing battles since before we had space travel. Lost a lot of them too. But we learned something important. What is that? If you're stubborn enough, if you refuse to give up no matter what, sometimes the impossible becomes possible. He finished setting a charge and stood up. Besides, I've got orders to link up with my unit. Can't do that if I'm dead, and you've got a ridge to hold, so we help each other. Velsha felt something strange in her chest. Hope, maybe, or just the relief of not being alone anymore. Your unit was scattered in the drop? Yeah, Jake admitted. Something hit our insertion craft before we could deploy properly. The whole company got spread across 100 kilometers. I've been trying to reach the rally point for 3 days now, but the enemy keeps getting in the way. 3 days without resupply? Velsha asked, concerned. Jake shrugged. I've gone longer. You learn to make do. He pulled out a ration pack from his belt. Here, you need to eat. Can't fight on an empty stomach. Velsha accepted the package carefully. It was surprisingly heavy for its size. When she opened it, the smell hit her immediately. Rich, dense, full of proteins and fats her nose could identify even through the artificial preservatives. She took a bite and her eyes widened. This is very concentrated. Human military rations, Jake explained, eating his own pack quickly. We burn a lot of calories, so they pack in as much nutrition as possible. Tastes like recycled boots, but it keeps you moving. Velsha disagreed silently. To her, it tasted better than anything she had eaten in days. She finished the pack while Jake continued fortifying their position. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. Beautiful, if not for the circumstances. They will attack at night, Velsha said quietly. The Zarvan see better in darkness than my people do. But not better than humans, Jake replied. He tapped the side of his helmet. Thermal imaging, night vision, motion tracking. Darkness is just another battlefield condition for us. He paused. Tell me about the Zarvan tactics. What should I expect? Velsha settled into a defensive position and began explaining. The Zarvan collective fought in waves, wearing down defenders through attrition. They used their cybernetic enhancements to push beyond normal physical limits, attacking until their organic parts failed completely. They coordinated through neural links, making them hard to surprise or outmaneuver. Jake listened carefully, asking questions about weak points and command structures. He was intelligent, Velsha realized. Not just a warrior, but a soldier who understood how to think tactically. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. Okay, he said. Here's what we do. They expect defenders to fight from static positions, right? So we stay mobile, hit and fade using the terrain. Force them to chase us through kill zones. He pointed at the charges he had placed. These will break up their formations. Then we hit the fragments before they can reform. A sound strategy, Velsha agreed. But there are only 2 of us against hundreds. Jake checked his weapon and looked out at the darkening valley. Yeah, that's why we have to be smart about it. Quality over quantity. Make them afraid to advance. Make them think we're more than we are. He glanced at her. You up for it? Velsha picked up the broken pieces of her spear and set them aside carefully. She would repair them properly if she survived. For now, she drew her sidearm and checked the charge. I stood alone against them before you arrived. With you here, I actually have hope we might live through the night. That's the spirit, Jake said approvingly. He extended his hand in that human gesture Velsha had heard about but never experienced. After a moment, she clasped it. His grip was strong, confident. Mind if I enter the fight? Jake asked with that predator grin. Velsha felt herself smile back, baring her own teeth in the Kraturi way. I would be honored to stand beside you, human. As night fell completely, they waited together on the ridge. Below them, lights began appearing in the valley. Enemy forces massing for the assault. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. An impossible fight, but Velsha no longer felt afraid. Beside her stood a human who had fallen from the sky, who fought like death itself and who refused to lose. Maybe that would be enough. Maybe the impossible could become possible. The enemy began their advance, and the 2 warriors prepared to hold the line. The first attack came 2 hours after sunset. Velsha heard them before she saw them, the mechanical whir of cybernetic limbs moving through the darkness, hundreds of footsteps, perfectly synchronized through neural links. The Zarvan moved like a single organism, flowing up the slope toward the ridge with terrible efficiency. Jake waited beside her, perfectly still. His armor had shifted to night camouflage, blending with the rocks. Velsha could barely see him even though he was right next to her. Through her scope, she watched the enemy advance into the kill zone Jake had prepared. "Wait for it," Jake whispered through their tactical link. "Let them commit." The Zarvan moved closer, spreading out as they climbed. Their formations were textbook perfect, each unit supporting the others. They expected defenders to open fire early, wasting ammunition on their heavy armor. But Jake and Velsha remained silent, invisible in the darkness. The lead elements reached the markers Jake had placed. Still he waited, letting more and more enemies enter the zone. Velsha felt her heart's pounding, her instincts screaming to shoot. But she trusted the human's judgment. He had done this before. "Now," Jake said calmly. The ridge exploded. Jake's charges detonated in sequence, tearing through the Zarvan formation with calculated precision. Bodies flew through the air, cybernetics sparking as power cores ruptured. The perfectly coordinated advance shattered into chaos. Jake opened fire immediately, each shot finding a target. Velsha joined him, her sidearms spitting plasma bolts into the confused mass. The enemy tried to reform, but Jake had positioned them perfectly. Every time they grouped up, another charge detonated. Every time they spread out, concentrated fire cut them down. The attack broke after 10 minutes. The survivors retreated down the slope, leaving dozens of bodies behind. Velsha counted at least 50 confirmed kills. Against any other enemy, it would have been a decisive victory. But the Zarvan had thousands of troops. This was just a probe testing their defenses. "Good shooting," Jake said, checking his ammunition counter. But that was just the warm-up. The real attack comes next. Velsha moved to a new position as Jake had instructed. "Never stay in one place after engaging. Keep moving, stay unpredictable." "How many charges do you have left?" "Enough for 2 more ambushes like that," Jake replied. "After that, it's just us and our weapons." He paused, listening to something on his communication system. His expression darkened. "Command says reinforcements are delayed. Enemy is hitting them harder than expected. We're looking at 24 hours now, maybe more." 24 hours. Velsha felt a chill despite her armor's temperature regulation. "Can we hold that long?" Jake was silent for a moment, then nodded. "We have to. There's no other option." He pulled out what looked like spare parts and started working on something. "I'm making you a new weapon. That sidearm won't be enough for extended combat." Velsha watched as he took a broken Zarvan pike and began modifying it. He used his combat knife as the blade, securing it with battlefield engineering that would have made Velsha's weapon masters weep. But when he handed it to her 20 minutes later, the balance was surprisingly good. She tested it with a few practice movements. "Crude, yes, but functional and deadly. Thank you," she said quietly. Among her people, weapons were sacred. For him to craft one for her, even improvised, was a gesture of deep respect. "Don't mention it," Jake replied. "Just promise me you'll use it to kill lots of Zarvan." "That I can promise," Velsha said firmly. The second attack came an hour later. This time the Zarvan were more cautious, using heavy shields and advancing in tight formations. They had learned from the first assault. Jake detonated more charges, but the shielded troops pushed through, accepting losses to close the distance. Velsha met them with her new spear, the blade Jake had made cutting through armor with vicious efficiency. The combat knife was sharper than any Krithari weapon, forged from human military alloys designed for exactly this kind of fighting. She moved through the enemy like water, her training combining with the weapon's deadly edge. Jake fought beside her, his rifle barking death. When enemies got too close, he used the weapon like a club, breaking cybernetic limbs with brutal strikes. He moved constantly, never giving them a stationary target. Once, Velsha saw him duck under a plasma blade, grab the wielder's arm, and redirect the weapon into another enemy before shooting both. Humans, she realized, were terrifyingly efficient at violence. They made war into an art form, refined through countless generations of conflict. Jake fought like killing was as natural as breathing, every movement precise and purposeful. The second assault broke when Jake called down marker flares, lighting up the battlefield. The sudden illumination blinded the Zarvan, who had been using darkness as cover. In those precious seconds, Velsha and Jake cut down the remaining attackers. The survivors fled again, leaving the ridge painted blue and green with mixed alien blood. "You fight well," Velsha said, breathing hard. Her armor had taken more hits, the cracks spreading. "Is all human combat training this intensive?" Jake reloaded his weapon, his hands steady despite the adrenaline. We train for worst-case scenarios. Because in our history, worst case happens a lot. He pointed at the valley. They're massing again. Bigger force this time. They're going to try to overwhelm us with pure numbers. Velsha followed his gaze. In the distance, she could see lights. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. The entire Zarvan force in this sector was gathering for one massive push. They would sacrifice whatever it took to break through. Her tactical communicator buzzed. Command updating their situation. She listened to the report, her expression growing grim. When it finished, she looked at Jake. Command says the enemy is withdrawing forces from other sectors. They are concentrating everything on this ridge. Intelligence believes they will attack with at least 3,000 troops. She paused. We are ordered to hold at all costs. If we fail, the pass opens and the capital is vulnerable. Jake checked his remaining ammunition and equipment. His expression was thoughtful, calculating. 3,000. With our remaining charges and ammunition, we can maybe take down 500 if we're perfect. That leaves 2,500 that we have to stop with personal weapons and determination. It sounds impossible, Velsha said quietly. Jake looked at her, and that strange human smile appeared again. Yeah, it does. He started setting up their final defensive line. You know what humans say about impossible situations? What? We say bring it on. He secured the last of his charges. I've been in impossible situations before. Fought battles where we were outnumbered 10 to 1. Lost friends holding positions just like this one. You know what I learned? Velsha shook her head. The enemy can have better numbers, better equipment, better position. They can have every advantage in the book. But there's one thing they can't match if you don't let them. Jake tapped his chest. Heart. The will to stand and fight when every logical reason says you should run. That's the human advantage. We're too stupid or too stubborn to know when we're beaten. That is insane, Velsha said. Yeah, Jake agreed cheerfully. Absolutely insane. That's why it works. He checked his chronometer. They'll hit us in about 2 hours. Dawn attack, try to use the rising sun to blind us. Standard tactics. Velsha sat down heavily, suddenly feeling the weight of her exhaustion. 2 days of constant fighting, followed by 2 more assaults tonight. Her body was reaching its limits. Jake, I must be honest. I do not know if I can last another battle. Jake sat down beside her and pulled out another ration pack. He split it in half and gave her part. You're already past what most people could endure. The fact that you're still standing is impressive. He ate his portion quickly. But here's the thing about limits. They're mostly in your head. Your body can go further than you think. You just have to give it a reason. What reason do you have? Velsha asked, genuinely curious. Jake was quiet for a long moment, looking up at the stars. I have a kid sister back on Earth. Name's Katie, she's 16, wants to be a doctor. Sends me messages about her classes, her friends, all the normal stuff. He smiled sadly. She doesn't really understand what I do out here. She just knows her big brother fights in space. I made her a promise before I deployed. I promised I'd come home. And that is enough? Velsha asked. One promise to one person? That's everything, Jake said simply. Every soldier up here, we're all fighting for someone back home. Parents, siblings, friends, lovers. People who depend on us to stand between them and the dark. That's what makes impossible possible. We're not fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for them. Velsha thought about her own family. Her brother who managed the family estate. Her sister who taught younglings. Her mother who had carried her father's broken spear home from war 30 cycles ago. They were depending on her now, just as Jake's sister depended on him. I understand, she said quietly. We fight for those who cannot. Exactly, Jake confirmed. He stood up and offered her his hand. So let's get ready to throw the galaxy's worst party. When those 3,000 Zarvan come up that slope, we're going to make them regret every step. Velsha took his hand and let him pull her up. Her body still ached, but her spirit felt stronger. Beside her stood a human who refused to lose, who... The dawn came slowly, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Jake watched the sunrise through his helmet display, noting the irony. Red sky at morning, sailors take warning. The old Earth saying seemed appropriate. Below them, the Zarvan army assembled in the valley like a dark sea, ready to crash against their tiny island. Velsha stood beside him, her new spear held ready. She had cleaned her armor as best she could during the brief rest, but the damage was obvious. Cracks spiderwebbed across the chest plate. Her left arm moved stiffly from the injury underneath, but her eyes were clear and focused. She was ready. They are taking their time, she observed, watching the enemy formation slowly organize. Trying to intimidate us, Jake replied. Show us how hopeless it is. Make us doubt. He checked his rifle one more time. They don't understand humans very well if they think that works. Or Krethari, Velsha added with pride. My people have held hopeless positions before. It is part of our heritage, and good, Jake said. Then we're both from stubborn species. The enemy is going to hate that. He activated his tactical display, studying the approach routes. They'll hit us in 3 waves. First wave tries to break through our position directly. Second wave flanks from both sides. Third wave is the hammer meant to crush whatever's left. How do you know this? Velsha asked. Because it's what I would do, Jake said simply. Zarvan tactics are efficient but predictable. They optimize for victory through numbers and coordination. Creative thinking isn't their strength. He pointed at several positions on the ridge. We use that against them. Fall back through preset positions, make them chase us. Every meter they advance, we make them pay. The Zarvan began their attack as the sun broke over the horizon. The first wave came up the slope like a metal tide. Thousands of cybernetically enhanced soldiers moving in perfect synchronization. Their neural links allowed them to coordinate without communication, each one knowing exactly where the others were. Jake let them come, waiting until they reached the prepared positions. Then he triggered his remaining charges. Explosions rippled through the formation, creating gaps and confusion. But the Zarvan kept coming, flowing around the destroyed units like water around rocks. Velsha opened fire with her sidearm, choosing targets carefully. Each shot had to count. Jake worked his rifle steadily, the weapon barking death with mechanical precision. But there were so many enemies. For every one they killed, 5 more took its place. Fall back point Alpha, Jake called out calmly. They retreated to the second position, a natural choke point between 2 rock formations. The enemy funneled into the gap and Jake and Velsha cut them down. Bodies piled up, forcing the following troops to climb over their own dead. A plasma mortar round screamed overhead and detonated behind them, showering them with debris. The Zarvan had brought heavy weapons. More rounds followed, systematically destroying their prepared positions. The ridge shook with each impact, rocks tumbling down the slope. They are determined, Velsha shouted over the explosions. So are we, Jake replied, shooting an enemy that got too close. Fall back point Beta now. They retreated again, fighting every step of the way. The Zarvan pressed hard, sensing victory. Their second wave moved around the flanks as Jake had predicted, trying to surround them. But Jake had planned for it, positioning their fallback points to maintain fields of fire on all approaches. The fighting became desperate. Jake's ammunition counter dropped lower and lower. His rifle clicked empty during a crucial moment and a Zarvan soldier rushed him. Jake dropped the weapon and drew his sidearm in one smooth motion, putting 3 rounds through the enemy's faceplate. More enemies came, and he fought them with his hands when the sidearm ran dry too, using his armor's enhanced strength to break metal and bone. Velsha danced through the chaos with her spear, the improvised weapon proving its worth. Jake's combat knife cut through Zarvan armor like it was cloth, and Velsha used every bit of her training to maximize the advantage. She spun, stabbed, slashed, and struck, her movements flowing from one to the next without pause. Around her, enemies fell, but they were being pushed back. Step by step, meter by meter, the weight of numbers was telling. Jake retrieved his rifle and loaded his last magazine. Velsha's sidearm overheated and stopped working. They were down to their final weapons and rapidly running out of room to retreat. Then the third wave hit. Velsha saw it first, a massive shape moving through the enemy ranks. A Zarvan war mech 3 times the height of a normal soldier. Its armor was thick and heavily shielded, designed to break through fortified positions. Plasma cannons rotated on its shoulders, targeting the 2 defenders. Down, Jake yelled, tackling Velsha behind a boulder. The plasma cannons fired, superheating the air where they had been standing. The rock glowed red from the heat. Jake pulled her up and they ran, the mech's footsteps shaking the ground behind them. We cannot fight that thing, Velsha said urgently. Our weapons will not penetrate its shields. Jake's expression was grim as he looked at the approaching mech. Around it, fresh Zarvan troops advanced with renewed confidence. The war machine was their trump card, meant to break the defender's will. And it was working. Even Jake's stubborn determination wavered at the sight of that mobile fortress. But then something changed in his eyes. That look Velsha had seen before, the one that said he was about to do something crazy. He pulled out a small device from his belt, his last demo charge. The explosive was meant for stationary targets, not the heavily armored mech stomping toward them. "Cover me," Jake said quietly. "What are you doing?" Velsha demanded. "Something stupid," Jake replied. Before she could stop him, he was moving, sprinting directly at the war mech. Velsha's hearts nearly stopped. She laid down covering fire, trying to keep the infantry away from him, but her attention was fixed on Jake's suicidal charge. The human ran straight at the mech, dodging plasma bolts that carved burning lines across the ridge. His armor's shields flared and died under the assault. Still he ran. The mech raised its foot to crush him. Jake dove forward, sliding beneath the massive leg on his stomach. He emerged on the other side, directly below the machine's main body. The mech tried to track him, but its weapons couldn't angle down far enough. Jake had found its blind spot. He placed the demo charge directly on the power core housing, using his armor's magnetic clamps to ensure it stuck. Then he ran, legs pumping as he put distance between himself and the war machine. The mech's sensors detected the explosive. It tried to warn the operator. Too late, the explosion was tremendous. The power core detonated in a chain reaction, tearing the mech apart from inside. Chunks of armor flew in every direction. The blast wave caught Jake and threw him through the air like a toy. He hit the ground hard, tumbled, and lay still. "Jake!" Velsha screamed. She fought her way toward him, her spear a blur of lethal motion. The enemy, shocked by the loss of their war mech, fell back momentarily. It gave Velsha the seconds she needed. She reached Jake and dragged him behind cover. His armor was cracked, smoke rising from the damaged systems. Through the cracks, she could see blood. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, obviously broken. But he was breathing, still alive. "That was incredibly foolish," Velsha said, her voice shaking. Jake coughed and blood flecked his lips. "Yeah, but it worked." He tried to sit up and gasped in pain. "Arms broken. Maybe some ribs too. But the mech's dead. That evens the odds a little." "You cannot fight like this," Velsha protested. Jake pulled his sidearm with his right hand and checked the charge. "Sure I can. I'm ambidextrous, trained to shoot with either hand." He grinned through the pain, one of the advantages of being paranoid about worst-case scenarios. The Zarvan were regrouping, preparing for another push. They had lost their war mech, but they still had overwhelming numbers. Velsha looked at Jake, broken but defiant. She looked at the approaching enemy, and she made a decision. "Then we hold here," she said firmly. "This is our final position. We do not retreat any further." Jake nodded, settling into a defensive posture despite his injuries. "Last stand time." "All right then." He braced his weapon against a rock to steady it. "Let's show them what happens when you back stubborn people into a corner." The enemy came again, a massive wave of metal and malice. Jake and Velsha met them with everything they had left. Jake fired with mechanical precision despite his injuries, each shot placed exactly where it needed to be. Velsha fought like a warrior of legend, her spear reaping a harvest of enemies, but they were fading. Exhaustion, injuries, and depleted ammunition were taking their toll. Jake's vision blurred from blood loss. Velsha's movement slowed, her strength failing. The enemy sensed it, pressing harder, scenting victory. Jake loaded his absolute last power cell into his sidearm. Velsha's spear felt heavy in her hands. They looked at each other. Two warriors from different worlds, united by the shared determination to never surrender. "It has been an honor," Velsha said quietly. "Likewise," Jake replied. "But let's not write our obituaries yet. I promised my sister I'd come home. Plan to keep that promise." They turned to face the enemy one final time, and then they heard it. A sound that made Jake's face split into a genuine smile of relief. The dropships came down like falling stars, their hulls glowing red from atmospheric friction. 3 of them, moving at speeds that would have torn apart most aircraft. But human military engineering was built for exactly this kind of insanity. They didn't slow down until the last possible second, retro thrusters firing in thunderous bursts that shook the entire ridge. The ships didn't land. They hovered at treetop level, their belly guns already firing. Heavy rounds tore through the Zarvan formation, cutting down entire squads. The enemy tried to respond, plasma bolts splashing against military-grade shields. But the dropships were designed to survive contested landings. The enemy fire barely scratched them. Ropes dropped from the open bay doors. Marines in full combat, armor fast roped down, hitting the ground already shooting. They moved with the same efficient brutality Jake had shown, each one a trained killer backed by the best equipment humanity could produce. Within seconds, 40 human soldiers had deployed and formed a defensive perimeter. The Zarvan assault, which had been moments from overrunning Jake and Velshaw, shattered against this new threat. The enemy tried to adapt, redirecting forces to meet the Marines. But the dropships provided overwhelming fire support, their weapons systems targeting with inhuman accuracy. Every time the Zarvan concentrated their forces, the ship's guns scattered them. A woman in officer's armor approached Jake and Velshaw's position, moving in a low crouch. Her helmet retracted, revealing a weathered face with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at Jake's battered condition and shook her head. "You always find the worst trouble, Morrison," she said, but there was relief in her voice. Jake laughed, which turned into a cough. "Wasn't looking for it this time, Lieutenant Hoffman. It found me." Claire Hoffman was already calling for a medic while she helped Jake to a more secure position. Another Marine did the same for Velshaw, who was too exhausted to protest. Within moments, combat medics were working on both of them, injecting painkillers and sealing wounds. "Report," Hoffman ordered, her tone professional despite the chaos around them. Jake grimaced as the medic set his broken arm. "The ridge is strategically vital. Enemy has been trying to take it for 2 days. Defender force was wiped out except for Velshaw here. I dropped in during their last assault and we've been holding since." Hoffman looked at the battlefield, taking in the hundreds of enemy bodies scattered across the slope. Her expression showed impressed surprise. "You two did all this?" "Had to," Jake said simply. "They kept coming, so we kept killing them." Velshaw, having her wounds treated nearby, spoke up. "Jake Morrison fought like 10 warriors. Without him, I would have fallen hours ago." Hoffman glanced at Velshaw, assessing her quickly. "Krithari 3rd Spear, right? We got the tactical brief. Your people are good fighters." She turned back to organizing her troops. "Sergeant Martinez, set up heavy weapons on the ridgeline. Chen, get those support shields deployed. Peterson, establish communication with Krithari Command and update them on the situation." The Marines moved with practiced efficiency, transforming the ridge into a proper defensive position in minutes. They had brought supplies, ammunition, and actual equipment unlike Jake's improvised defenses. Heavy plasma cannons were set up covering all approach routes. Shield generators created overlapping defensive layers. The transformation was remarkable. Below them, the Zarvan forces were retreating down the pass. Faced with fresh troops, air support, and heavy weapons, they had no choice but to withdraw. The sight of them falling back would have been satisfying if Velshaw hadn't been so utterly exhausted. She watched numbly as the enemy that had nearly killed her fled from human firepower. "They're running," she said quietly, almost unable to believe it. Jake, his arm now properly splinted, nodded. "That's what happens when you hit them hard enough. The Zarvan are efficient, but they're not suicidal. When the cost gets too high, they withdraw and reassess." He paused. "Doesn't mean they won't come back, though." Hoffman returned, having organized the defense to her satisfaction. The dropships had lifted off to provide air cover while the Marines dug in. She sat down next to Jake, her expression serious. "Central Command sends their compliments," she said. "You holding this ridge disrupted the entire enemy offensive. They were planning to push through the pass and strike at the Krithari capital. Your defense forced them to commit their reserves here, which gave our forces time to establish proper defensive lines across the sector." Jake waved it off. "Just did what needed doing. Velshaw deserves most of the credit. She held for 2 days before I even showed up." Velshaw felt embarrassed by the praise. "I simply did my duty. Any Krithari warrior would have done the same." "Modesty from both of you," Hoffman said with a slight smile. "That's refreshing. Most soldiers would be bragging about holding off thousands with just 2 fighters." She stood up. "The Zarvan are withdrawing from this entire continent. Intelligence says they're consolidating at their primary staging area. This offensive is done." "Does that mean we won?" Jake asked. Hoffman's expression was cautious. We stopped them here. The Krathari capital is safe, and the enemy lost substantial forces trying to take this position. But one? The war is far from over. The Zarvan Collective has resources across multiple systems. This was just one campaign. Jake nodded, understanding. Wars weren't won in single battles, no matter how crucial. But they were won in moments like this where people refused to break no matter the odds. Every position held, every enemy stopped, brought ultimate victory a little closer. A Krathari officer arrived via transport escorted by 2 human Marines. He was older, his armor bearing the marks of many battles. When he saw Velsha, his expression shifted to something like awe. Velsha of the 3rd Spear, he said formally. The Elder Council has heard of your stand. Your name is being spoken in every command center across our world. Velsha struggled to stand, wincing at her injuries. I only did what was necessary, Commander. The Krathari officer shook his head. You held a vital position against impossible odds. You fought alongside an allied soldier to preserve our people's safety. This is the highest form of honor. He turned to Jake. And you, human, you are Jake Morrison? Jake nodded carefully, unsure where this was going. The council wishes to meet you both, the officer continued. They wish to thank you personally for your service. He paused, choosing his words carefully. And they wish to honor you in the traditional way of our people. Hoffman looked interested. What kind of honor? That is for the council to reveal, the officer said. But I can say it is unprecedented for a non-Krathari to receive what they have planned. Velsha looked surprised and honored in equal measure. For the council to offer traditional honors to an outsider was almost unheard of. It spoke to how significant Jake's actions had been. Jake looked uncomfortable with the attention. I appreciate the thought, but I'm just a soldier. I was doing my job. Your job involved jumping from orbit without a vehicle and holding a position against 3,000 enemies, Hoffman pointed out dryly. I think that goes a bit beyond standard duty. The lieutenant is correct, the Krathari officer agreed. Come both of you. Medical teams at our capital can treat your injuries better than field conditions allow, and the council is eager to meet the warriors who saved our world. As they prepared to leave, Jake looked out over the ridge one last time. The sun was fully up now, illuminating the battlefield. The cost had been high. Velsha's entire squad dead, the ridge scarred by weapons fire and explosions. But it had held. They had held. You thinking about your sister? Hoffman asked quietly, having moved up beside him. Jake smiled slightly. Yeah, thinking about how to explain this in my next message to Katie. She's going to freak out when she hears I fell from space. You're not going to mention fighting off 3,000 enemies. Are you kidding? My mom would kill me if she knew half the stuff I do out here. Jake paused. Besides, the important part isn't the fighting. It's that I kept my promise. Still alive, still coming home eventually. Velsha joined them, her injuries treated enough that she could walk. This concept of home, she said thoughtfully. You humans speak of it with such importance. Is it truly what drives you? Jake considered the question. Home is where the people you love are. Fighting out here, holding impossible positions, all of it is about protecting that. About making sure there's still a home to go back to. He looked at Velsha. You understand that? You fought for your capital, your people, your family, same thing. Velsha nodded slowly. Yes. I believe I do understand now. We are not so different, humans and Krathari. We both fight for what matters most. That's what makes good allies, Jake said. Understanding what each other is fighting for. They boarded the transport with the Krathari officer and several Marines. As the craft lifted off, Velsha looked down at the ridge. The position she had held for days, had nearly died defending, was now secure in human hands. Marines patrolled the area, setting up permanent defenses. It would not fall. Thank you, she said quietly to Jake. For falling from the sky. For standing with me. For making the impossible possible. Jake smiled that human smile, the one that showed teeth, but was somehow warm. That's what we do best, find impossible situations. And 1 week later, Jake stood in the Great Hall of the Crathery Council, feeling distinctly uncomfortable. His dress uniform was pristine, his broken arm properly healed thanks to advanced medical treatment. But standing in front of thousands of alien dignitaries while they stared at him was not his idea of a good time. He would rather face another war mech than deal with this kind of attention. Beside him, Velsha stood at attention in her formal armor. It was ceremonial rather than combat gear, decorated with the honors of her family line. She looked completely at ease with the ceremony, while Jake felt like he was about to jump out of his skin. Lieutenant Hoffman stood behind them with several other Marines, their presence lending official weight to the occasion. The Elder Council sat on a raised platform, 7 ancient Crathari who had led their people through countless wars. The eldest, among them, a female whose armor bore scars from battles decades old, rose to speak. The hall fell silent immediately. "We gather today to honor those who held the Pass of Shadows," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "For 3 days, a single position determined the fate of our world. Had it fallen, our capital would have been vulnerable. Our people would have faced destruction." She gestured to Velsha. Velsha of the Third Spear held that position with her squad. When her companions fell, she stood alone. She fought with broken weapons and a wounded body, refusing to yield even when defeat seemed certain. Velsha bowed her head respectfully, accepting the words but clearly uncomfortable with the praise. Jake understood the feeling completely. The elder continued. "And then, when all seemed lost, a human warrior fell from the sky. Jake Morrison, of Earth's 47th Orbital Drop Infantry, joined the fight without hesitation. Together, these 2 warriors held against thousands. They made the impossible become real." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Jake tried not to fidget. This was taking forever, and he really wanted it to be over. "Today, we honor them both in our traditional way," the elder said. She gestured, and 2 attendants brought forward a long object wrapped in cloth. When they unwrapped it, Jake heard Velsha gasp. It was her spear, but not broken anymore. The weapon had been completely reforged, the ancient metal combined with something new. Jake recognized his combat knife somehow integrated into the blade. The 2 metals had been merged seamlessly, creating something stronger than either alone. The spear practically glowed in the hall's light, beautiful and deadly. "This weapon represents the bond between our peoples," the elder explained. "Crathari metal and human steel, forged together in the fires of shared battle. It is stronger for the joining, as are our 2 species." Velsha accepted the spear with shaking hands. Jake could see tears in her eyes. For her people, weapons were sacred, family treasures. To have hers restored and improved was an incredible honor. Then the elder turned to Jake. "Jake Morrison, you came to our world as a soldier doing his duty, but you stayed and fought for our people as though they were your own. You asked for nothing in return. You expected no reward. Yet our traditions demand we honor such service." 2 more attendants approached, carrying something Jake didn't recognize. It was a piece of armor, designed to fit over a human chest plate. The metal was the same as Velsha's, ceremonial gear, marked with symbols Jake couldn't read. "This is the mark of Shantari," the elder said. "In your language, it means blade brother. It is granted only to warriors who have proven themselves beyond question, who have fought beside our people and earned our complete trust." She paused. "You are the first human to receive this honor. Wear it knowing that you are recognized as family by all Crathari." Jake accepted the armor piece, genuinely moved despite his discomfort with ceremonies. "I'm honored," he said simply, because anything else would have felt inadequate. The hall erupted in applause, the Crathari showing their approval in the traditional way. Jake and Velsha stood together, 2 warriors from different worlds, now bound by honor and shared experience. After the ceremony, there was a reception. Jake endured it as best he could, shaking hands and accepting congratulations from what felt like hundreds of Crathari officials. Lieutenant Hoffman rescued him eventually, steering him to a quieter corner of the hall. "You did good, Morrison," she said, handing him a drink. It was human alcohol, smuggled in specifically for the occasion. "The brass is very pleased. This kind of alliance building is worth more than a dozen military victories." Jake sipped the drink gratefully. "I wasn't trying to build alliances. I was just trying to stay alive and help Velsha do the same. Sometimes the best diplomacy happens when people aren't trying to be diplomatic," Hoffman observed. "You showed the Krathari what humanity is capable of, not through speeches or treaties, but through action. That matters." Velsha found them a few minutes later, her ceremonial armor exchanged for something more practical. She carried her reforged spear carefully, clearly treasuring it. "Jake," she said, "may I speak with you privately?" They found a balcony overlooking the city. Below them, the Krathari capital spread out in orderly districts, the architecture elegant and ancient. In the distance, Jake could see the pass they had defended. From here, it looked so small. Hard to believe that tiny strip of land had been worth so much blood. "I wanted to thank you properly," Velsha said, away from the ceremony and the crowds. "What you did on that ridge, it saved more than just my life. You saved my entire world." Jake leaned against the railing. "You would have held without me. Maybe not as long, but you weren't going to run." "Perhaps," Velsha acknowledged. "But I would have died, and the ridge would have fallen. You changed that outcome." She held up her spear. "This weapon means everything to my family. 6 generations of warriors carried it. When it broke, I thought that legacy was ended, but you gave me a piece of your own weapon to continue fighting. And now it has been reforged, stronger than before." "It's a good spear," Jake said honestly. "The smiths did amazing work combining the metals," Velsha smiled. "They said it was the most challenging forge they had ever attempted. Human steel is very different from our metals. But they succeeded, creating something new from 2 traditions." She paused. "Much like our peoples are doing now." Jake nodded, understanding the metaphor. "The war isn't over, the Zarvan will be back." "Yes," Velsha agreed. "But next time humans and Krathari will stand together from the beginning. Command is already coordinating joint operations. Your Lieutenant Hoffman has been assigned as liaison to our forces, and I have been given a new posting." "Oh?" Jake asked, curious. "I am to be part of the Joint Command Unit," Velsha explained, "working directly with human forces to coordinate tactics and strategy. It seems the Council believes I have developed an understanding of how your people fight." Jake grinned. "That's because you fought beside us. Nothing teaches you about someone like sharing a battlefield with them." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the alien city. Jake thought about the past week. The fighting, the desperation, the moment when he thought they were both going to die. And then the relief of reinforcements, the victory snatched from certain defeat. "Will you fight beside us again?" Velsha asked quietly. "When the Zarvan return?" Jake didn't hesitate. "Yeah. If they're going to threaten your people, they're going to have to go through me." He paused. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't break that spear again." Velsha laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "I will be more careful with it this time. Though if it does break, at least now I know a human who can help me fix it." "Just don't make a habit of it," Jake said. "My combat knives aren't cheap." They talked for a while longer, sharing stories about their respective worlds. Velsha told Jake about Krathari culture, their long history of honorable warfare. Jake told her about Earth, about humanity's often chaotic approach to conflict. They found they had more in common than expected. Both species valued courage, loyalty, and standing firm in the face of danger. Eventually, Lieutenant Hoffman came to collect Jake. His unit was shipping out in the morning, returning to their base for rest and refit. The war continued elsewhere, and the 47th Orbital Drop Infantry was needed. "Time to go, Morrison," Hoffman said. "Say your goodbyes." Jake stood and faced Velsha, extending his hand in the human gesture she had learned. "Until next time, Velsha of the Third Spear. Try not to fight any wars without me." Velsha clasped his hand firmly. Until next time, Jake Morrison, Shantari of Earth. Try not to fall from any more skies. They smiled at each other, two warriors who had shared an impossible battle and survived. Then Jake turned and left with Hoffman, heading back to his unit and whatever battles came next. Velsha remained on the balcony, looking out at her world. The capital was safe. The immediate threat ended. But more would come. The Zarvan Collective did not forgive defeats easily. They would return with greater forces, more weapons, more determination. But now the Krathari had allies. Strange, aggressive, impossibly stubborn allies who refused to lose even when all logic said they should. Humans who would fall from the sky to help. Who would stand beside you against any odds. Who would fight until their bodies broke but their spirits remained whole. She gripped her reforged spear, feeling the weight of it. Krathari tradition.